What's going on, guys? Jacob here. Welcome back to another video on Robski Football. Today I want to go and delve deep into the appointment of Roberto De Zerbi to Tottenham. Now, for many reasons, Roberto De Zerbi, especially since the rumours have started over the last week or two, Roberto De Zerbi as a person, as a manager, has been obviously questioned for many reasons. Now, today I want to go into why it could work and why it couldn't work. Of course, in the situation that Spurs are in, they are deep in it. It is a scenario that I don't think many people, football fans, would have seen coming in terms of, back-to-back poor finishes in the league table. Now, of course, with 7 games to go, Tottenham have got it all to do, and especially hovering around the relegation zone that they have a number of fixtures coming up against teams in that region of the table. So this is a very critical period, of course. Now, going into De Zerbi and why it could work. Now, he obviously has Premier League pedigree. It is apparent, of course, through his work at Brighton that he, when given the tools at his disposal, can make it work. Of course, he is known for a very aggressive style and high pressing up the field, with his 4-2-3-1 formation primarily. And of course, with the tools that he had at his disposal at Brighton, so for example, Cairo Matoma, obviously in times that Evan Ferguson was there, João Pedro, there's a quality players in the key positions in that team. And of course, he took them to their highest ever finish in the league table and also qualified them for Europa League football. On the side of De Zerbi to Spurs, he is now committed for 5 years to Spurs. There's no relegation clause on his contract, which means should this all go down the pan, in inverted commas, he is there for the championship. Now, if Spurs and De Zerbi want to part ways, should they go down, now that will cost Spurs a lot of money. Spurs have given Roberto De Zerbi around $15 million a year on a 5-year contract, which roughly equates to over $300,000 a week. Now, this is, of course, a very huge financial commitment for Spurs to make at a time like this. Now, I think that was a decision that the Spurs hierarchy were, inevitably forced into by their own performances as well. It's money that, of course, will help De Zerbi in the long term in his bank account, but it is money that Spurs had to pay. I think, given the stature of De Zerbi and the upcoming stature. Now, I don't believe, of course, he's on the same standard as a Guardiola, as a Klopp or an Arteta, for example. However, he has got that A-star factor, that A-list factor about him, where he, given this opportunity, hopefully he shows that he can manage on this big stage. It is a long-term commitment, and it is good to see that, of course, given De Zerbi, 300k a week is one thing, but having a commitment and a non-relegation clause also does help matters, and there should be no question marks against Tottenham as a team and their setup with De Zerbi over the summer, should they go down or should they stay up. It is, of course, apparent that Johan Lang, of course, well documented, has been a greater admirer, should I say, of De Zerbi, even before the appointment of Thomas Frank. He was their number one target all along. Of course, for one reason or another, that did not work out at the time. Now, looking back on Thomas Frank's time and tenure at Tottenham, the players did not seem to play for him and never seemed to gel to his system. Now, Thomas Frank, famously at Brentford, was a coach that seemed to nurture his players almost like a family figure, an uncle figure, if you will, but also tactically demanded the most from his players from a defensive side and being pragmatic and being able to counter quick going forward. Now, that did not seem to gel with the Spurs players, given that they were used to the Ange Postecoglou method, which is also pretty close to De Zerbi's setup. it is an exciting brand of football that De Zerbi brings, such as Postecoglou. That is the reason, after all, why a lot of Spurs fans, even to this day, are big fans and big admirers of Ange Postecoglou, and for the almost the energy that he and his system brought to the games, to the fans. That's why, especially it was helpful throughout their run at the Europa League, and obviously winning against Man United in that final. It was one that the feeling was good around Tottenham despite their lowly finish in that season. It remains to be seen what De Zerbi, of course, and the hierarchy alongside him will do with the squad. Now, of course, there is a lot of question marks against a lot of players, such as Christian Romero, Guglielmo Vicario, Xavi Simons, even for that matter, despite him only joining in the past summer. And with that being said, the next 7 games are crucial, and it's also going to be there are going to be a lot of signs to watch out for as to who is willing to put on that white shirt and actually perform for the club and De Zerbi, but also most importantly for the fans and their attempts to try and get back and secure safety. The appointment of De Zerbi does come with a sense of overachievement wherever he has been. Now, he managed a Sassuolo team that had consistently finished in the top 8 of Serie A, given their low budget. It was a great achievement as well. Of course, at Brighton, with an increased budget, but still in the what it can be argued as kind of the lower depths of the Premier League, he made them a sustainable team. First of all, that were able to be sustained based on their acquisitions of players and then selling them on, but while still maintaining a core group of players that all bought into that idea of his style of play. And again, we saw it at Brighton, how much the fans loved De Zerbi as a coach over his tenure and the achievements that they got together, especially with notable names and key players such as Kaoru Mitoma. You also have Lewis Dunk at the spine of that defence, but then also João Pedro, who's now obviously gone on to do reasonably good things at Chelsea. Of course, his success remains to be seen as to how well he can progress. Going into why this De Zerbi appointment might hit the rocks slightly now, given the time left. Of course, 7 games to go is a very tight window indeed, especially to turn a ship around such as Tottenham. It cannot be argued how big of a club Tottenham are. Now, of course, famously, there's been this Spursy mantra attached to them as a team, as a club, as a franchise, and that one is obviously going to be a tough one to shake off. And will it ever be shaken off is, of course, going to be something that we, as fans, it's one of those things. It's going to be tough for Spurs to shake that off and get rid of that name. And with such a coach in De Zerbi, I think he does have that cutting edge, much like an Ange Postecoglou in terms of his tactical setup. I think De Zerbi, even as a personality, will be divisive in a good nature when it comes to the media, when it comes to getting fans on his side within the media, but also most importantly the players, because he is going into a team and taking a hold of a team that are very, very low on confidence. Of course, injuries have played a big part throughout this season so far for Tottenham, as it did in the previous season under Ange Postecoglou as well. He's coming with a team where they have not won more than 3 games so far this season at home. It's not a place where at least from the last few games of Thomas Frank's tenure and last few games of Igor Tudor's tenure seemed where the fans were on their side. Now, that of course is a job for De Zerbi and also the players to prove that they are, first of all, able to get the fans back on side through their, not even the results, but their performances. And will they wear that shirt with pride? Will they run their socks off for the full 90 minutes? It's a thing that as a football fan, the least you expect is to run your heart out and to give everything you can, despite whatever result the fans at least require and request an expect, for that matter, a 10 out of 10 performance when it comes to effort. Of course, should De Zerbi manage to keep this Tottenham team in the Premier League, the focus then shifts over to the summer, and in the build-up to the following season, can De Zerbi be that long-term vision and long-term partner as the manager of Tottenham? Of course, it's been well documented that De Zerbi has butted heads with numerous figures at both Brighton and Marseille during his time as manager at the respective teams. Of course, famously, he had mentioned and talked about Tony Bloom, the owner of Brighton, questioning his ambition as an owner and the club's ambition and their structure overall, and of course clashing heads with players and staff at Marseille. Videos circulating on social media platforms of De Zerbi in training sessions clashing with players, telling them to leave his training session after poor levels of effort or poor levels of quality. Is De Zerbi that long-term partner for Tottenham? Now, of course, when we look at the hierarchy of Tottenham and what's happened, especially over this last year, with the departure of Daniel Levy, who, of course, has been there, had been there for around 25 years going on. He was a pivotal part not only in the development of the new stadium, but also how Tottenham acted in the way of the transfer windows. Now, Daniel Levy was, of course, someone that was seen as very pragmatic when it came to money. He famously, of course, sold players like Gareth Bale and Luka Modric, whilst bringing in 7 or 8 other players for the same money. Now, of course, those players did not work out, and now that influence of Daniel Levy has left Tottenham, it does remain to be seen, and it's going to be very interesting to see how people like Johan Lang and Vinay Venkatesham manage this team. Of course, either way, should they stay or drop into the Championship. Now, after the summer that Tottenham had for the transfer window, they did spend a lot of money. Now, with Javi Simmons, with players such as Mohamed Kudus, the ambition is there. It's apparent that Tottenham, under this new regime, if you will, aren't afraid to spend money. The question remains that is that money going to be spent wisely? Because, of course, the experience of the players they brought in, the youth that they brought in has been questioned because, are they too focused on bringing in young players with potential that potentially could be sold for $80-100 million, such as players like Archie Gray, Lucas Bergvall. I'd maybe argue not that towards their upper echelons of value, but Destiny Udogie is also one player with huge potential as well. Have they put too much attention towards those young players and recruiting those guys rather than bringing in players of experience and of still a higher quality as well? Now, De Zerbi and Tottenham, are they a match made in heaven? We shall see. Of course, as a platform for De Zerbi, as a project for De Zerbi, I'm sure, of course, it's an enticing one, even despite the situation that Spurs find themselves in. Looking at Tottenham's remaining 7 fixtures, it doesn't get any rosier. Next up, they have Sunderland away. It's a tough place to go, notoriously. Sunderland, of course, given their last victory against Newcastle at St James's Park, they are on a high right now. The supporters will be behind them, and it's not a game that De Zerbi can afford to employ his style of play. Nevertheless, I do think he's obviously going to be a smart manager about this game and treat this game as one where he needs to create a foundation of belief amongst the squad. I do think if they don't win the game and if they at least afford to get a draw out of this, that's not a negative result, despite the circumstances. Then Tottenham, the following weekend, move back down to London and play Brighton, De Zerbi's ex-employer, which of course for many reasons will be highly driven in the media, but also in terms of Brighton. Brighton are a team sitting in the middle of the table at this time. They are a team where it's been a bit hot and cold, it's fair to say, under Fabian Hürzeler, but Brighton do have the underlying quality there. Again, with players such as Karim Matoma, They have players in good quality positions. Van Heck has also been one that's maybe been a shining light throughout. They do have that quality to pose a threat, especially away from home. Then Tottenham move into games against Wolves and then Aston Villa. Wolves, of course, are looking likely to drop down into the Championship despite the best efforts of Rob Edwards in parts over the last couple of months. Going on to the game against Aston Villa. Aston Villa themselves are, of course, looking to secure Champions League spot at the best. Of course, Chelsea and Liverpool are currently 6 and 5 points behind them, which will be also a tasty kind of race in itself. And then, of course, going into Leeds, the Leeds game, without doubt, is probably the most important game aside from the game coming up against Sunderland. For the reasons for the Leeds game is because, of course, Leeds as a whole have been a team that have, I would say, not really turned opinions around, but they have given a good account of themselves in patches throughout the season. We look at the game against Liverpool at home. We look at the goal scoring spree that players such as Lucas Nemecha and Dominic Calvert-Lewin went through. And Leeds are a tough team to play. They are a lot tougher to play at Ellen Road than they are away, which is obviously a good thing for De Zerbi and this Spurs team. And then after that Leeds game come Chelsea. Now Chelsea again are on a journey of their own, having been thrown out of the Champions League by PSG. Chelsea now have one focus really is on the Premier League for me. I think it's, of course, given the amount of expenditure that Chelsea have made since Todd Boehly took charge, has been obviously of high numbers, and it's not one where they can afford to miss out on Champions League, especially given the TV deals and the money involved. Now Chelsea, of course, are 6 points behind. Against the Tottenham team in a derby is, of course, going to be a huge game, and that's one, of course, that De Zerbi will try and get his players up for, and I think one that might spring a surprise, hopefully, if De Zerbi is able to get this team into gear going into that penultimate game of the season. And then on the last game of the season is Tottenham against Everton. Now Everton again also flying pretty high on their standards at this time. I believe at the start of the season Everton didn't seem like a team kicking into gear. They did have a few glimpses, most notably with performances by Jack Grealish at the start of the season, kind of teetered out, a few months after him, kind of going off the boil, and then coming back and being almost revitalised, coming out of that winter period and shooting themselves now up to 8th position, and also themselves are in a hunt for that European spot. Now, again, Tottenham against Everton on that last game of the season is going to be a huge game for all the reasons that we've listed, but it is going to be a very good watch from here on out until the end of the season, and one that I'm going to be keeping a close eye on. Thank you very much again for joining. This has been Jacob, and I appreciate the support, and I will be coming back with another video soon. Stay tuned. Goodbye.